Nerdcast assemble!
Stay dandy, baby. The Mandalorian is the best thing to happen to Star Wars since Star Wars. And you know what? It's a series that has completely taken the world by storm. As a hardcore Star Wars fan, I simply cannot get enough of The Mandalorian. I didn't have much of an opportunity to talk about the first season of the show, but I'm really hyped for season 2, which, thanks to the good folks over at Disney, has just dropped, and the very first episode of the season is nothing short of incredible. There are scenes in this entire episode which are better than the entirety of the entire brand new sequel trilogy, which of course has left a massive Jabba-sized deuce on the floor that continues to fester to this very day. Luckily, there is a shining and bright future for Star Wars, and it comes in the form of Pedro Pascal in a Mandalorian suit. Not to mention the return of everybody's favorite little buddy, Baby Yoda, or the child, or as I like to call him, Baby Nuggies. But enough about that. I want to talk about the first episode of the second season of The Mandalorian. I'm going to go ahead and put up a spoiler warning right now for those of you who have not watched the episode. This has been your official warning. Everybody get that? Good. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into this episode right here, an episode which is titled The Marshal. And it's a very simple episode. And honestly, that's probably my favorite thing about Mandalorian is the simplicity of the show. There's not this giant, massive storyline which feels like it's trying to tie into the very lore of the Star Wars universe. It's not the legacy of the Skywalker family. It's not the battle between the rebels and the Empire. It's just about a bounty hunter making his way through the universe and trying to save an alien child and get him back to his family. But along the way, he always ends up meeting an interesting cast of characters, as well as meeting new people that have problems or even brand new adversaries. And this episode certainly has both of those things going for it. In fact, the entire storyline is real simple. It's basically just Mando trying to find some of his other fellow Mandalorians so that he can get a little more information about where Baby Nuggies is actually from. The episode actually opens up with him on some mysterious planet where he goes to this really awesome underground fight club where they have Gamorrean guards from Jabba's palace, which are in gladiatorial combat. And he ends up meeting with this weird Cyclops-looking alien who just so happens to be voiced by John Leguizamo, which is awesome. He's now an official part of the Star Wars universe, and this character is instantaneously classic. Essentially, this is where Mando is going to get some information about where to find the Mandalorians, but this is all actually a trap which has been cooked up by this guy, who goes by the name of Gor Karish, and basically, he really thinks he's going to be able to take down the Mando, and basically, this is an excuse to see Mandalorian do what he does best, which is kick the shit out of people in the most stylish way possible, where he ends up fighting against a couple of guards in really stylish fashion, using some cool weapons like these tiny little homing rockets or these knives that he throws, and he even manages to catch this goofy running Cyclops by taking him and putting him up on a massive light before getting some interrogated information out of him about where he could potentially find the next Mandalorian, which is going to lead him to the most overused planet in Star Wars history. Yes, it's Tatooine. But before he does so, he leaves this guy for dead, claiming that he will not kill him himself, but he leaves in the dark to be basically feasted upon by these weird, mysterious creatures with red glowing eyes. It's a great introduction to the episode that shows, while the Mandalorian certainly has a code of honor, he's not above doing some pretty underhanded things to get the things that he wants. And I love that about his character. He's neither good nor evil, he's somewhere in between. This is the way, you know what I mean? So, of course, the Mandalorian makes it to the planet of Tatooine, and instead of going to the classics like Mos Eisley and Mos Espa, we end up going to a brand new location, which is called Mos Pelgo. Now, people who play some of the Star Wars video games will see that this name is familiar, as it is taken directly from one of those PC MMO Star Wars games, but they've made it a realized thing in The Mandalorian, and unlike Espa and Eisley, Mos Pelgo is basically just a rundown old town with barely anyone in it, and it's constantly being ravaged by a massive monster, and it takes the form of none other than a Krayt dragon, which, for other hardcore Star Wars fans, you're going to immediately know what this means. It is going to be one of the scourges of Tatooine, one of its most dangerous inhabitants, a creature that will make even the Sarlacc shit its shitty little pants. And I gotta admit, I didn't expect the Krayt dragon to be this big. This thing's like a freaking sandworm from Dune. It's massive. It could quite literally swallow the town if it wanted. But for the most part, it's simply going after their livestock, as well as ravaging a bunch of Tusken Raiders, and more on that later. But essentially, Mando makes his way through the town quietly as he makes his way to a cantina where he wants to learn about the Mandalorian that's supposedly in town. Now, nobody really seems to know who this is, but they do know that there's someone else in the town who's wearing armor similar to him, and that so happens to be the Marshal of the entire town, who suddenly decides to make his appearance like a classic character in a Western, and this is a character who goes by the name of Cobb Vanth, and he's played by Timothy Olyphant, who does a really great job of essentially turning into a good old boy in space. But what I really love about his character, and something that Star Wars fans are probably going to cream their pants over, is the fact that he just so happens to be wearing the armor of none other than Boba Fett. And I can honestly say, while I was watching this with a friend, I was practically ready to jump up out of my chair. Initially thinking that this could potentially actually be Boba Fett, but that doesn't actually end up being the case. He wastes no time in actually taking off his helmet, revealing that essentially he is not a Mandalorian. Because as we all know, you just don't take off your helmet if you're a Mandalorian. It's just not the thing to do. It's not the way, so to speak. But Mando actually decides that he wants to take this armor back and return it to its proper place, or to at least keep it himself. And basically, it almost turns into like this big sort of showdown between these two characters. They're about to draw on each other like a big freaking Western, when of course that's when the big Krayt dragon comes into town, and now they have a brand new mutual enemy. And this is where the Marshal reveals that he's actually going to give him the armor if he can help him get rid of the Krayt dragon. And that's when this big epic adventure goes with these two characters going off into the desert to try and find this creature. Not too long after, though, they come upon a group of Tusken Raiders, and there's been a few times in the series where we've actually seen sort of like the culture and the custom of these characters before, mostly in the prequel trilogies and in very short and small scenes. This is the most time that we've ever spent with Tusken Raiders, and while they might come across as very savage and violent, they have their very own code of ethics, and that's something that's made very clear with the fact that Mando can actually speak, I'm going to call it Tuscanese. I don't know what the actual language is. The point is, there's a lot of great scenes of him actually communicating with them in this episode, and it's great. I mean, if this is not going to become meme-worthy, I don't know what is. There are so many great scenes of watching the Tuskens communicate with Mando and with each other. I can already see people creating their very own subtitles for all the things that these characters are going to say, and it also made me realize how incredibly classic this actually felt. Not classic in a Star Wars sense, classic in a Western sense, because overall this entire story is essentially a play on the whole classic cowboys and Indians things, where these two characters come together to take down a mutual enemy. And that's what's really great here. Essentially, Mando acts as a mediator between the Marshal and his town and the Tusken Raiders, as they have to come up with a plan in order to actually take down this massive monster. And in watching the humans and the Tusken Raiders and all the other weird aliens come together to actually come up with a plan to take down this creature is nothing short of fantastic. They actually managed to find its cave, which just so happens to be a hollowed out piece of ground which originally belonged to a Sarlacc pit, because apparently these things just eat Sarlaccs. It's just what they do. And they come up with this insane plan where they're going to be burying bombs in the ground, drawing this thing out so that when it finally slithers over the top of it, they're just going to set off the bombs and cause it to explode. And it's a really breakneck sequence. It's fantastic the way that it's done. It is absolutely action-packed, and it's not an easy plan. It doesn't work initially. So it leads to this fantastic scene at the end of the episode, which might be, and maybe this is an exaggeration, the most epic scene of The Mandalorian yet, where basically the bombs go off, it doesn't end up killing it, and then Mando comes up with this crazy plan where there's this bantha, which is covered with all of these bombs, and he ends up leading the Krayt dragon over to it, which ends up swallowing him and the bantha. Mando then decides that he's going to shoot these bombs, fly out of its mouth, as we pan to this amazing wide shot of this huge explosion of this massive creature as it just explodes and a giant ripple just explodes across the landscape. It is a great scene, and the attention to detail afterwards is even better, with the Tuskens harvesting the meat and all of the organs of this creature, even finding a rare Krayt dragon pearl, which is a really nice callback again to the lore of the Star Wars universe. I thought that that was really freaking great. And then, of course, the Marshal decides that he's going to owe up to everything. He's going to end up giving him the armor as Mando makes his way out of the desert and into the sunset. But of course that leads to what is probably the biggest scene of the entire series. Yes, I'm going to call it that, because ever since the beginning of Mandalorian, everybody's been having the theory that eventually this was actually just going to be Boba Fett. But it was revealed at the end of the season that it was actually a new character by the name of Din Djarin. He has nothing to do with Boba Fett outside of the fact that their armor is very similar. But we all knew that he was eventually going to return to the series in some form of capacity, which is a major change for the series, as the last time we saw Boba Fett, he was being eaten by a giant sand vagina in the desert. Well, it just so happens that it looks like Boba Fett might actually still be alive, because at the very end of this episode, we actually get to see what I believe could very well be Boba Fett. I'm saying could be because I have a couple of other theories about what could be potentially going on here, but the fact of the matter is, this is the first time that we have maybe seen Boba Fett without his armor for the first time, and it's not much of a shock or surprise, but actor Temuera Morrison returns, the character who played Jango Fett in the prequel trilogy, and he has returned to actually play this character, a version of Boba Fett which is bald and completely scarred on his face, potentially from the things that happened when he was inside of the Sarlacc's stomach. Now, what's really interesting here is that there is absolutely no explanation on how he potentially survived, and also how he lost his armor. In fact, the character of the Marshal actually receives this armor because he bought it off some Jawas when he was in the desert completely stranded after trying to save the town from a bunch of crazy bandits. And when eventually he did get this armor, it gave him the strength to return and the defenses to take these people out and essentially become the law of Mos Pelgo. Now, this brings up Now, of course, this brings up a number of really interesting questions for the series. One of them being, if Boba Fett is still alive, why did he never go back after his armor, and why wouldn't he even try to get it back from someone like Cobb Vanth? Cobb Vanth is a fairly competent character in terms of his abilities, but at the end of the day, he's just a grizzled old Marshal who's trying to do the best he can, but he's not exactly a hardcore mercenary. He's just lucky that he's wearing some armor that gives him a lot of protection. And easily, I think Boba Fett could have taken his armor back. Does he even want his armor back? Is he even going to return for the rest of the series? That's been the question that I've been asking myself ever since I've watched this episode. Is this simply just going to be a cameo to let us, the hardcore Star Wars fans, realize that Boba Fett is indeed alive? Or is he going to be a bigger part of this season as he continuously tracks down Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, trying to potentially take his armor back, or simply trying to have another interaction with his character? It's hard to say, but it is really awesome to know that Boba Fett could very well still be alive in the series. Not to mention, there's so many other great callbacks to some other great things in Star Wars in this episode. I really love the fact that towards the end, when Mando and the Marshal are working together, he ends up sort of tricking him by just smacking his jetpack, which hilariously, just like when Han Solo did it in Return of the Jedi, causes his jetpack to malfunction, causing him to fly away crazy. I thought that was really awesome. I mean, that armor still isn't working, that jetpack is still kind of faulty after all these years, and I really love attention to detail like that. That stuff is fantastic. That and just the overall detail and look of Boba Fett's armor, it's instantly recognizable. It has all the same marks. That minute that freaking Cobb Vanth set that helmet down and you could see that dent that was actually in the helmet, the actual color of all of it, it sent just an absolute shiver down my spine. And for people who don't like the constant callbacks of, hey, remember this from Star Wars, remember that from Star Wars, that might turn you off a little bit. But this is Boba fucking Fett, people! Be excited! But let's go ahead and get to the elephant in the room. What is arguably the most successful thing about the Mandalorian series has got to be the introduction of the character of the child, Baby Nuggies, Baby Yoda, whatever you want to call him. He doesn't do much in this episode, but it really seems like Disney is intentionally trying to make as many cute Baby Yoda memes as possible. There are multiple scenes in this episode which basically just consist of Baby Yoda being super cute, popping out from something, showing his head, wiggling his ears, riding on a freaking speeder bike, stuff like that. Basically things that can be instantly turned into a freaking GIF and animated and sent out en masse. It seems like they know what they're doing, and in some ways that is kind of off-putting for the character. I really hope eventually we're going to get more truth about what it is with the Baby Yoda thing. I have a feeling they don't even really know what they're doing yet, and it might not even happen in this season. We're probably not going to get any real proper answers. I have a feeling they're going to try and push this thing out as far as they possibly can, but in many ways, I'm kind of okay with that still. I still love these more standalone storylines with these small little threads, which are actually piecing all of the episodes together. It's these smaller, self-contained stories, which I find myself loving so much. It's what is at the core of Star Wars, is not how over-the-top and crazy and grandiose it is, but how simple it is in such an interesting setting. That's what I love about The Mandalorian so much. And again, yeah, getting back to Easter eggs again. Like the fact that freaking Cobb Vanth's speeder bike is essentially constructed from Anakin Skywalker's pod racer. It's little scenes like that that I think are really great. That and just all the Tusken scenes. Like I said, you can watch those over and over and they're always going to be funny. Basically, I loved the first episode of this season, and man, it's got me so excited for the future of where it could potentially be going, as they've already been giving us a lot of promises of big characters who are going to be returning to the series. There's a lot of lingering threads from the last season that they're still going to have to build upon, and I really love, and this is something that is going to be controversial with people, I love that they only give us one episode a week. I know a lot of people just want to binge the entire show, but being able to look forward to a new episode of this every week and to be surprised and not knowing what's actually going to happen is just nothing short of amazing. You know, when the sequel trilogy came out, it was exciting and there's some really cool stuff, but with all the trailers and press material, you practically saw half the movie before it even came out. And with this, you never really know what's going to happen every single time. And it continues to be, like I said, I think the best thing to happen to Star Wars since the original freaking trilogy. At its core, it is what I love most all about it. And again, I could talk about this episode for another hour. There were details in this episode were great, like the whole scene where Cobb Vanth is recalling his entire backstory about how this mining facility came in and took over the town as soon as the Empire was defeated, highlighting the fact that the Empire themselves were evil, but they did at least establish some sort of order. But again, showing that when order is de-established, criminal things happen. And I love the scene at the beginning of watching Mando and the child as they're walking through this dark alley, and you can see all this like anti-Empire graffiti all over the walls, just the designs of all the different aliens that appear in this episode. It's got John Leguizamo as a Cyclops. 5 out of 5. How could you not like this episode? It was great, and I really did love it. But you heard my rambling thoughts about this episode. I want to hear yours. Make sure to sound off in the comment section below, telling me if you were watching the latest season of The Mandalorian, if you liked this episode, if you didn't like this episode. Do you believe that that is actually the true return of Boba Fett, or could it simply just be another clone altogether? For all we know, it could be Rex as well. Rex was bald, but he did have a beard. Who knows? But it almost certainly is going to be the return of Boba Fett. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and your theories and your hopes for the future of the next big season of The Mandalorian. So thank you guys so much for watching this review. Please subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. I also do a ton of anime reviews, so make sure to check those out. If you did like the video, take your blaster, take your jetpack, take your freaking Tusken Raider bow staff and hit that like button. Helps out these videos a lot and ensures more people can see my content. I also would like to take this time to thank all of my patrons. You guys are awesome. Please make sure to check out my Patreon page. You guys are incredible for not only watching my videos, but making monthly donations. Remember, first-time donators, I will review an anime series of your choice, as well as adding your name to this list of people who are the producers of Ace Guru. So thank you guys so much for watching this review, and as always, may the Force be with you.